The political games begin after a devastating massacre hits two mosques in New Zealand. A gunman opening fire on worshippers in the city of Christchurch, killing at least 49 people and injuring dozens more. But the left already blaming the president.
There's an intolerance that's being spread in this country, in this world, and it comes from the political dialogue. Let's be clear, it comes from political leaders.
Words do have consequences, and we know that at the very pinnacle of power in our own country, people are talking about good people on both sides.
It's all about invaders. It's all about invaders, which is similar language to the killer at the synagogue in Pittsburgh. It's also language that President Trump used in a campaign ad before the midterm election. The word invader means something to white supremacists around the world.
Here with reaction, counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, this really bothers me because the media is lying about this guy. He is a kook, he's an absolute lunatic, and I read his manifesto, and what the media is saying about the manifesto is total BS. This guy says, and this is a quote, "The nation with the closest political and social values to my own is the People's Republic of China." He says he's not a conservative, not a Nazi. He's inspired by all these other whack jobs, not Donald Trump. He calls himself an eco-nationalist, obsessed with fertility rates. He's a racist who thinks immigrants are overpopulating the earth and causing global warming. This is who this guy is. He's not a Donald Trump acolyte, yet the media is putting all the blame on the right and the president's supporters.
Well, you're right. They immediately politicize everything. They do something else. They insert themselves. I must speak. I must say something. No, you don't. You can actually shut up and pray for people and wait for the authorities to make their judgments. And in fact, you can also get the facts from the United States authorities, New Zealand. Look at what the president said right away, condemning violence, condemning hate, standing with the people of New Zealand. People believe that we should all be safe everywhere, but in our places of worship, certainly. And don't do things that will inspire a copycat. So actually, this manifesto provided information that we haven't had in many other mass shootings, which is clear evidence of who this person is and what motivates him, but don't let that get in the way of having a conclusion in search of evidence. And there's something else going on. You played a couple clips. I've been noticing in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, as it's increasingly obvious they have no idea how to defeat Donald Trump in 2020. They keep talking about the 2016 campaign. It's getting a little weird. They're playing all these clips constantly, and I think it's because they don't want to cover the economy. They don't want to cover the strides he's making around the globe. They don't want to cover how he's rebalancing trade. They don't want to cover the fact that he says we have a humanitarian and national security crisis at our own border, and is this past Friday provided the first veto of his presidency because he believes that. But the media don't let any of that get in their way. They never let the facts get in the way of their opinions. And by the way, they're speaking to each other. They're not informing the public. They're giving opinions. That's not news. Give us news. And if you're waiting on the news, we can be patient and wait on the news.
No, you're right. They're not informing the public. They're actually lying to the public because I just proved it. You mentioned the immigration situation. You know, they had the vote in the Senate, 59-41. And I just want to read the Republican senators who broke with the president on the national emergency declaration on the border, just so they're aware. It's Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Lamar Alexander, Mitt Romney, Jerry Moran, Pat Toomey, Rob Portman, Roger Wicker, Marco Rubio, and Roy Blunt. I understand they have their own reasons for doing this. Congress passed the National Emergency Declaration Act. Are they saying that Congress passed an unconstitutional act? I mean, what's the act there if it's not to be used? I understand their point, but at the same time, there is an emergency, and you got to do something because the Democrats do not want to protect the country.
Well, this is not a constitutional crisis. It's a national security crisis at our border. That's what I would call 76,000 migrant aliens being apprehended in February of this year alone. That's what I would call 9 and 10-year-old girls being pumped with birth control by their families before they come here, and then being administered pregnancy tests when they get into at the border, because we know how perilous the journey can come. We know how many women are being sexually assaulted on the journey. I would call it a crisis that we have tons and tons of drugs pouring over our border into our communities. I would call it a crisis that people are being smuggled, and MS-13 gangs and other criminal cartels are coming over the border. That's not everyone, but it shouldn't be one. If it's one, it's 10 too many. And so this president has been consistent for 4 years now, Jesse. We have a crisis at the border. He tried to let Congress do its job. The Congress and the courts have fallen down on the job. They failed to do it. And he is invoking a congressional act from 1976.
Yeah, not that long ago.
It is 43 years old.
Right.
If you don't like that act, then go ahead, Congress,
right,
and undo that act.
Right.
They don't have the guts to do that.
No.
So we don't have a constitutional crisis here. We have a humanitarian security crisis.
Right.
Also, there was a surprise that some of the senators who voted with the president against a disapproval resolution, which he vetoed anyway, that they're running in 2020. You know why? Because they hear in North Carolina and in Nebraska and a couple other places, they hear their voters, their people say, excuse me, you better get back to Washington, do your job, and secure that border.
All right, Kellyanne, there she is at the White House. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesse.